Well, it might be.
Hey, sister.
Sister.
Hey, welcome, listeners. If you're listening via the Sunflower Society podcast, this is episode 41 with your hostesses, with the mostesses, the Gonzalez sisters. I'm Justine. Who are you?
I'm me. I'm Kara.
Or you might be tuning in via vlog, a video blog, so to speak. We have been recording these on video and we're putting them on our brand new YouTube channel for Spiritually Strategic Co., our company together, our baby company. We're still growing and nurturing the baby. If you're not watching on video, I have my hair straight and I have on massive earrings. And I was asking Kara before we got on, like, does my hair look super weird or like hippie-ish? Because I don't normally part it in the center. So I'm a bit out of my comfort zone today.
Maybe you'll have a little more sass since you parted your hair.
I might have to, if we get into big arguments, I might have to take my earrings off, even though I'm not in person with you to fight you. But yeah, Kara and I, actually, that's pretty funny. Kara and I used to have like really bad fights about clothes because we shared a room forever and I would always borrow her clothes, but I would like leave pit stains, ketchup stains, and then I'd hang it back up. So to our brother, if you're listening, you were not the only sibling that I annoyed. Just so you know.
I definitely had a few scratch marks and handprints on my back.
I don't know why did we fight that way? Like, we never actually punched each other, but we would claw each other, and then we would also, like, the power of that open-handed smack, we would literally have like red welts on our backs.
Yeah. We're good now, though.
Yeah. I mean, and I never, like, I don't think that actually harmed our relationship, even as kids, but I don't think so. I don't know.
We didn't know how to use our words back then, I don't think.
I still don't sometimes.
True, same. I'll say that.
Well, we're here. We've been on hiatus for a few weeks, and I think for a few reasons. We've had a couple different episodes about COVID. And then in the past month especially, we've had a lot of heightened focus. And I know Kara and I are both involved in different ways in diversity, equity, and inclusion work in our respective professions. That happens to be like kind of my whole life's work as an adult, and also my research. So I think right now we want to talk a little bit about this whole idea about agreeing to disagree, because there's so much information, whether it's about systemic racism, Black Lives Matter, the police. We could go on and on. And if you want to know more about our viewpoints on that, obviously you can visit either of our Instagrams or the Instagram for Spiritually Strategic _co. If you guys want to get a better idea of our perspective and some of our thoughts on different things going on in the world right now. And we don't shy away from talking about that. But before we dive into some of those topics and just the conversations that we've been having with friends and family, with one another, I know you and I have spent more hours on the phone in the past month than we have on this podcast the entire life of it. So that's the other reason that energetically, I think that everybody right now, we have to be very sensitive to each person's lived experiences and honor that people are going to show up in different ways and people have different roles to play. So hopefully this conversation will bring people together. and help people to understand, how do we, when we get into a situation where we're supercharged and focused on our own belief system, how do we try to get past what maybe I don't like about what somebody else is saying, and try to understand that they have a different lived experience than I do. So we're all on this journey. And yeah, that's just an introduction, but I would love for us to start. We have been starting, and I really like this segment that we've been kicking off each episode with, called Fave and Fail, where we each share something that we tried. It might be a recipe, a new yoga pose, a product, whatever. But something that we really liked, and then something that maybe we tried and either it wasn't for us, or we failed miserably trying it. um, but in funny ways. So, do you have yours in mind?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, go first.
Mine are related to, I've been doing a lot of digging for good stories to share regarding all of the things that are going on right now. And in that digging, I found.
Do you mean specifically about COVID-19 or Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been trying to share. I've shared some of the negative stuff, but I've also shared a lot of positive stories. And in my searching, I've come up obviously some crazy things online. So one of my fave new accounts that I just started following in the last month or so, she's on Instagram. She's an actress named I Am Tabitha Brown. And she and her daughters and her little baby boy, he's not a baby, but he's so cute and small and precious, and they cook together, and then her and her daughters do a segment on Monday mornings. She just has really good energy, and I've been really loving her heart for God and also for the movement that's going on right now. She has a really good perspective because she is Black, her husband is Black, and he's a police officer where they live. So she has a really, really, I feel like, healthy perspective on all of that, and she's really positive, and she loves to cook. So I just love her sense of humor, and her spirit just shines through.
I'm going to follow her now.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Great share.
As far as a fail that I found, there is this couple on YouTube that built their channel basically on the back of their adoptive son, who recently they after 3 years of having him in their home, they decided to quote unquote rehome him. It's been I follow YouTube stuff pretty carefully just because I find it really entertaining, but that is a glaring fail. And some of the stuff that the wife in particular has been putting out there has been, as an excuse to why they did what they did. I know there are complex issues that go into adoption, and I know also that sometimes there are things that happen that people get a child into their home and it's not a good fit, and they haven't been updated and apprised of the actual state of the child and the difficulty of the needs they might have, and if they're able to handle that on. And so in those cases, agencies will take that into consideration and will do some of that work of rehoming the child in a place that's more appropriate, but it typically doesn't occur 3 years after the child's been in a home. Not only that, they were using the child for video content, making hundreds of thousands of dollars by showcasing this kid in their home as part of their family. That was the main draw for many people to come to her channel, because prior to that,
adoption, it was their journey of adoption, right?
Exactly.
But then essentially the child was exploited very quickly.
Exactly. And now they came out with this big statement, basically, woe is me. They knew, like, there's clips showing that they knew exactly what they were getting into. I've seen video footage of the child interacting. He seemed, I obviously don't live in the home, but footage they were showing, he seemed like he was well adjusted and happy. Obviously, again, I don't live in the home, but that whole thing has been eye-opening, and that led me to dig into some other things about international adoption and things like that, issues that we have in the state, the stateside.
Well, it's interesting too, because first of all, they were in a position where, okay, if you first of all, there's a process you have to go through. First of all, it's already a red flag if for some reason they were doing it as, like, I'm using air quotes here, an underground adoption. In other words, not going through an agency, all those pieces. That's already a red flag.
They did go through an agency.
If they did, okay, now let's go to my point too. If they went through an agency, there's extensive. We have family members who have adopted, and I have friends that have adopted from other countries. There's extensive years of processes, typically screenings. You have to be very, very clear about what the conditions are for not only you, but also for that child, and if you are a match for them, if you are going to be a family that can create an environment that is loving and nurturing for that child. And so it's I don't know. The other fascinating thing that also brings to mind, honestly, because there's so much talk about, and a lot of movements and effort to eradicate human trafficking, but then you look at the situation, you're like, that is
trafficking.
It's the same dehumanization. If we really want to look at slavery and the historical context of just dehumanization, it's the same motive, which is ego and which is self-serving. The same motives that birthed white supremacy and racism. So then it makes me wonder, okay, what if this person over here, this guy who's trafficking young girls, right? And people look at that as, oh, it's terrible, we have to stop it. Okay, well, are the same laws going to apply to this couple? Because they trafficked a human being, essentially.
No.
Which I know some people would disagree with me saying that, but to me, it sounds like the exact same process, except almost worse, because it could even be argued, and I personally have met people who have been sex workers. It could be argued, and some will say, I actually made that decision. I might have been being groomed at some point, but I made that decision, right? Because I didn't want to be at home, or I left home when I was 16 or 15 or whatever the person's story is. Please understand, I am not saying that that's usually the case. But even at a minimum, that child didn't have a say. It was a baby.
And they knew.
Sorry, this is a long tangent for our fave and fail, but that's a major fail. Like, I mean, and beyond that, it's just disgusting. It's disgusting.
It is. And now they're out there seeking sympathy and empathy, and they're getting it.
Well,
her name is Micah Stouffer. If you have any kind of, her husband also has like an automotive channel or something like that. So they're trying to slyly like put their followers, push them over that way. So if you do any YouTube forwarding or anything like that, don't support.
Okay. Yeah. I watched a couple of the videos you had shared with me, but I at least watched enough of their videos and read up some of the actual like news source stories to just kind of see like what's really going on here. Because that's the other piece. They decided to put themselves out there. So now you can't cry about being under scrutiny when you're the ones who decided to exploit and put into the media what you were doing, and document it. So, well, my fave and fail. So my fave is also an Instagram account. It's one that if you watch my stories on Instagram, I promoted yesterday. And I'm super excited to promote it again, and I want to get the details. because I'm pretty sure that you have a bit of a hand in this account. So my new fave on Instagram is an account for a cat. And so it's called, you need to all follow at Gemma the Kitty, Gemma the Kitty, Gemma the Kitty. It's so super cute, and it's Kara's daughter. So it's my 9-year-old niece. But the thing that I am just flipping my lid over, I mean, because this 9-year-old has taught me more about Instagram with a few posts than I've learned from any influencer that's on Instagram or any trying of my own. And I find like, and you have to tell us if you're the writer behind those, but I'm sure you're not. I know it's her because I know your daughter. But I started reading her captions, and I'm like, this girl's a comedic genius. Now, we might be biased, right? She's related, obviously, but go follow at Gemma the Kitty. But how did this come about? Do you want to let listeners know?
So we had a cat that showed up at the beginning of quarantine. She was really small. She was like an adolescent cat. And we named her Corona. And she is an outside cat. She's a good mouser, so we let her sleep in the garage if she wants to, but sometimes she doesn't want to. But pretty soon she started growing a belly, and I initially thought maybe she had worms or something, but it was the baby. She had a baby and was keeping it under a toolbox in our garage. And we found it one night when we were just standing there, and it was this tiny little black cat with the most beautiful blue wide eyes. They're not even like normal cat eyes.
They're not.
Like,
they're beautiful.
Like my eyes.
Yeah.
And so we've been
and Olivia's too.
And Olivia's, yeah. So we've been there hanging out in a cardboard box in our garage. The little kitty's learning to hunt right now. So
well, yeah. Go
really
follow.
Cool to watch them, like,
yeah. So was that her idea, or what? Wow. So she just said, I'm going to start an Instagram, which, by the way, we thought about before. Like, we definitely have tried photo shoots with Rio. Yeah. But he's just, you can't really keep anything on the guy. That's their dog. He's a family dog. We've told that story before. I won't go into the 10-minute story of Rio. Go back to our past episode. But she seems like she's having a blast with it. But anyways, go follow her account. Show this third grader who going into fourth grade, but she's been quarantined, for like 4 months. So go show her some love. It's her creative project. Okay, so my fail. Probably this morning, a little bit ago, I made some coffee in a Greca, and I was out of creamer. I didn't even end up going to Dunkin'. I told Kara, I'm like, hey, give me like 20 minutes. I'm gonna go to Dunkin' and get coffee because I knew I ran out of creamer. But I had oat milk in my fridge, which it's still good. It hasn't. Wait a minute. That's what happened. That's why it's a fail. I looked at the date and I'm like, yeah, it's still good. It says like June 20th, but it's never been opened. And oat milk, it's been in my fridge.
Yeah, it's
but
not good.
Well, when I opened it, it was separated. So when it first came out, it was all like clear, almost watery.
That's no good.
Oh, well, I'm drinking a little bit of it in the coffee right now. I guess we'll find out. But it is a fail because I didn't realize that can happen to oat milk. It doesn't taste weird. It doesn't smell weird. I shook it up and it didn't stay separated, which you're always supposed to shake it. So it just makes me wonder. I mean, typically there's a little settling with almond milks or oat milks, but it doesn't taste weird. It doesn't smell weird. It had never been opened. I guess we will find out. There's only like, I don't know, 2 tablespoons in here, but
good luck.
Kara knows that I'm a little famous for being a little on the. No, not a week and a half. Sometimes I just lose track of days, okay? Sometimes I lose track of days, and then you got to eat some food, whatever's there, and it's like a 50-50 gamble.
Sell by date is recommended. So
okay.
Well, I usually go like a week past that for like dairy maybe and yogurt, stuff like that. Meat though, I usually try to use it by sell by date or a day after.
That's my fail. Pretty simple. Well, let's dive into our topic though. Okay. So we're talking agree to disagree. Okay, this phrase has been around, it's ages old. I've personally said it and used that term for a long time. So we want to dive into it though as it pertains to current events, right? And current topics. And even maybe a little bit of religious topics. But I think we also want to model, like, the whole reason that we started this podcast was because Kara and I have quite different perspectives in regard to how we have had our lived experiences in life, where we've lived, who, kids or no kids, where the type of home we stay in. Like, just there's a lot of differences in how we've lived our adult lives, and therefore we have different perspectives. We're both in public service, but in different sectors. So there's all these nuances where we overlap in a lot of ways, and obviously we're sisters and super close and all that. But beyond that, part of the reason that we started the podcast was because we have very different perspectives. Literally, that's what the overview, if you read the description of our podcast on any of the channels it's on, it literally says that, because you'll even hear us on episodes where Kara describes her faith very differently than I would. Kara and I have both had vastly different experiences in the church, in particular. So I think for both of us, just to clarify before we kind of talk through things, I've never looked at agreeing to disagree as a negative thing. I think what I want to unpack though is I see so much of that flung around on Facebook right now, and sometimes it's embedded in very emotionally charged, sometimes very hateful exchanges and dialogue. What are your bigger thoughts on this before we kind of like just talk about some topics?
I feel like it's a conversation stopper, and at a certain point you do hit the point in a conversation where you're going round and round and you're each saying the same things you've been saying, and then it's appropriate. You're probably not going to convince anybody in a one-time interaction to come over to your way of thinking, but to say on the outset, I my stance, you say your stance, and then we just say agree to disagree without any kind of discussion of any kind at all, is just kind of like saying, I am good with believing what I believe. I don't want to open my mind to anything else. And so agree to disagree. I'm going to just keep on to what I have and what I hold. And I'm not willing or wanting to hear your story and why you think the way that you do. Because a lot of the things that we disagree on, if we talk about it, we actually don't disagree that much. We might come from different spaces and how we get there, but when we come down to it, we actually have a lot more in common as humans than we don't have in common, is what I've come to know.
Right. Okay. Would you agree? So listeners, I'm gonna frame, I think we're both planning to frame everything this way, because I'm pretty confident that some of the things we travel down, we're actually gonna disagree on. So and we're okay with that. We're still sisters, we're still best friends. It's okay. So do you agree then, or do you disagree that if somebody says that they're just opting out of listening to you?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel.
I disagree.
Oh. Tell me more.
I would say there are contextual like boundaries you have to look at. And if you've already engaged in extensive like actual face-to-face or phone conversation, then to your point, I think it's warranted and okay to be like, well, I guess we just agree to disagree. There's nothing else to discuss right now. Right. But I think then there's other situations, to your point, where people just put that like on a Facebook comment or something because they've just chosen not to engage, and they're either upset or they just don't want to hear what you have to say. And so in those situations, yeah, I think it's an opt-out to just be like, and I, when I say an opt-out, I actually don't even know that I think that's bad. I just think it means that somebody's decided, at this point, I don't really want to hear what you have to say, or at this point, I'm kind of going to step away from this conversation.
Right.
Which might be them self-regulating, right? Because maybe they don't want to say something that they'll regret.
Well, I also find it to be, and to a degree, I'm okay with it. Only in that it lets me know that either the person isn't strong enough in their conviction to begin with to defend it, or to say, like, this is my story and this is why. Maybe there isn't that there, and all they know is what they think they believe. And maybe they're doing that work. But agree to disagree is like, to me, it's like, I haven't thought about it enough to be able to explain it to you. Or
right.
Maybe I'm searching and I don't want to agree with you yet, but I'm still like figuring out the details of what's going on. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm fine with either way, obviously. But it's those conversations where it's like, we can see we're in totally like, you're giving me a statement and you really are firm on this, but you just don't want to talk about anything from my perspective. That's when it becomes something like, okay, well, conversation to me is always more productive than not talking about something. Like in relationships, that's the case. Anywhere that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take a moment to cool off if you're heated about something, but conversation is always required for moving above and beyond what you know. And Justine and I, like, we are constantly seeking new knowledge and new perspective because it just helps us to be stronger leaders in our respective areas. Because, you know, if you can't learn to look at somebody through, I guess, where they come from,
their lived experience,
you're only going to understand them through your lens. And so you might look at what they're doing or the results of what they're doing for in your life. This is what it would be and why it would be, but for them it's something completely different. So,
well, I think we also have to, right now, whether it's COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, peaceful protests, whatever issue or thing that might be being talked about, I think we have to also understand before you engage, like, understand your purpose. What's your purpose? And if people stopped and asked themselves, what's my purpose right now for posting this? Am I trying to help educate people? Am I trying to just kind of put out there some other thoughts? Maybe I don't even agree with them. I don't know. Maybe I'm just putting something out there to see what the reaction is.
Right.
Because people have different, people have different reasons for putting things out there. And I try to be very explicit, whether it's on my company pages or my personal pages. I try to be very explicit that, hey, the purpose of this is intended to help grow your knowledge, right? Or whatever. Or the purpose of this is to engage in a dialogue. But because sometimes we're just reacting right away, we sometimes haven't processed what's our purpose. And I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, we would have probably define our purpose as, I do want to convince this person that my way of thinking is quote unquote the right way. So it's a very hard thing to step back and look at things in a way of, can I listen to this person and not make it about there's a right way and a wrong way? And the more that I continue to grow and understand the character and image of who God is, I think the more we realize and dive into even the nature and character of the man that Jesus was when he was serving on earth, they were not binary, meaning it has to be this way, it has to be this way. There's only this way, there's only right, and there's only wrong. There's only good and there's only bad. And I think because so many of us are wired that way, we really fall into that trap, and any structures or systems that are designed in that fashion are typically designed to control people. And if you look at even the political parties in the US, so you have this ongoing birth right now of, I'm really not Republican, I'm really not Democrat, but when you show up to the polls, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
And so I think people are calling this the Great Awakening, which I kind of love, because we always talk about, no, we can be a ///. I don't have to just be an educator. I don't have to just be an entrepreneur. I don't have to be just a mom or a wife or, right. It's the Renaissance, the whole idea of this awakening. And I think honestly, all of it is spiritual in nature. But I say all that to say, like, how do you approach that? And do you think that all of us as humans, we're really in the age of social media and digital transfer and digital, even dare I say, like digital relationships? I don't mean dating. I mean, how do you get to know people?
Right.
Because you can also feel like, oh, there's these accounts I follow on Instagram and I feel like I know this person. And you don't really know them. You know what content they're putting out. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that about people's positioning when they decide to post something or they decide to share something? And I'm zoning in on that because, number one, it's been part of our generation, and that segue into that full scale has happened in our lifetime. But then secondly, it's magnified, I think, right now because it's the only way that a lot of people have been connected throughout COVID-19.
Right. I feel, I don't know. Personally, I was in major bondage in the past, and really felt like I had to choose black or white. It's black or white. There's no gray. I'm not talking about people of color right now. I'm talking about a black and white.
Thank you for being explicit.
I had to choose. There was no gray area because I felt like if I didn't choose one or the other, I was doing something wrong. Either way. And I've come to know in my own faith journey that that's not truth. That's the farthest thing from the truth that is perpetuated in our conversations, in our dialogues. We feel like it's either right or wrong. It's either this or that. Instead of realizing, and we say this many times throughout our podcast episodes, there are different ways of getting there. There are different ways of looking at things, and our way, while it's right for us, if we've gone through the process of really diving in and processing why we believe what we believe or why we feel the way that we feel, that's the caveat to all of this. If you've not done that work and you're just internalizing things that have been told to you for years and years and years, that can be either from a religious standpoint, that can be from a political standpoint, a familial standpoint, maybe the values that your parents gave to you as you've grown and had your own family, now you feel like, this is really like not our family vibe. This is not how we want to raise our family. Not that there's anything wrong, but that for us, it doesn't work that way. That's not how we experience our family. But I think there's so many different dimensions of who, like, God is so much bigger than we've made him. God is like, we try to put reason and rationale behind everything. And I believe that God, created us to all interact in very intricate and special ways with one another. And so, how would we all be homogenous in the way that we think, feel, believe, all of those things?
And
But I
sometimes it's
think
how
that,
we're communicating. Sometimes it's how we're
right,
communicating too, because we're also, even though historically, yes, this has been ongoing evil, and the United States was very much designed in a way of 400 plus years of specific dehumanization of Black lives. Okay,
right.
so that's clear. If you've studied history in depthly, you know this to be true. So outside of that, though, when you start to look at narratives of people and the diversity and complexity, so beyond racial constructs and systemic racism, even just the stories of people within different ethnicities, different racial groups, different shades, right? Because those are also, race and ethnicity are also man-made constructs, right? To group people and categorize people. But when you look at then even that, you and I have very different personality styles. That's one thing. But then there's also communication styles. So a lot of times we might like I might be saying something to my man, but because his way of communicating is very different than mine, he might receive it very differently than I would. That doesn't have to do with the fact of gender, race, or anything. That has to do with personality and communication style. Sorry, just a sidebar.
I think that social media has made it almost like necessary for people to take a side. Because before all of that, before pre-Facebook, I didn't really get active on social media until like a year and a half ago. So the conversations, what I find though, is that I'm having a lot more conversations that are meaningful on, like, through the conduit of social media, because it's meant to be. Like, I look at, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's just all crap. You never know what you're getting. That is sometimes true, but there are also really valuable private conversations that I've had with people as a result of interacting.
But couldn't you say that about the
media.
news? Couldn't you say that about the daily news? Somebody who watches the daily news or reads the newspaper every day, that, oh, it's just all crap. You never know what you're getting. Couldn't you say the same thing?
You could say the same thing, and yeah. But I think social media gives us an easy way to have the conversation, because if I'm posting something, I fully expect that people are going to either read it and move on, not respond. They're going to interact with it, maybe share it, like it, comment on it, or they're going to reach out to me privately and say, hey, I really liked what you posted, or hey, I don't agree with you at all on what you posted. They may do that in the comments. They may do that per direct message. It is what it is. It's an open forum for conversation as far as how I see it. Right. And when in daily life, prior to the era of social media becoming a thing, did we feel comfortable going up to somebody in a coffee shop that we kind of know, and we see that they're reading an article on something that happened in town? Do we always engage in that way in person, or did we always engage in that way in person? Is it a little bit easier to start?
Yeah, I did.
Well, I didn't.
Yeah, I would be like, I work a lot at coffee shops. I have ever since I was a teacher. That's what I do on Saturdays. Go hang out and grade papers and do lesson plans, write literary letters back to my students. But there's other people there who are also doing work. So if you catch something, that's the conversation starter. I say, oh, what do you think about that? But see, there's a difference between me So let's break it down, because that's very different than no personal face and body language.
Right.
Which is not present on Facebook. You're getting like, you know, our filtered model-esque picture profile, right? And that you're not getting body language and interaction. And further, most people just automatically would be like, oh, I saw that, and did you blah 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 blah. I would never personally approach somebody that way. But how do you open up that conversation in that same way in social media? You'd never walk up to that same person and say that they're reading an article about I'm trying to think of a good example about teachers unions.
Okay.
And I saw that and I go, and this is at a coffee shop in person. Oh, that article on the front page, what do you think about all that? Then you can see where that person's at in their journey, versus if I would go, oh yeah, I saw that thing about the teachers unions and they all have an agenda. Can you believe that? Now you've already put a pressure. I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I think though, something that's really productive about social media is that, yes, in person, you would say, oh, what do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
In the social media world, we already know, well, you're putting out what you think of that.
Good point. Okay.
So it takes that initial conversation and like wipes it away.
You've taken a stance.
Right. Right. So I think that gets us to the heart of the matter a little quicker sometimes, but also to your point, having those initial conversations in person, I think could break down some barriers if people are willing to get real and honest. What I found in the past compared to what we deal with now is that people aren't really wanting or willing to go deep in conversation. You and I do, but the average person isn't willing or wanting to engage on a Tuesday morning over coffee.
I disagree.
About issues of racism or, well, my experience has been that that's not true.
No, I'm saying that because it's all about the approach. Because I do think that, and first of all, I don't agree with your use of terminology, average person. I don't know what that means, Kara. But but she's like, okay. No, but yeah, no, I think we all kind of go about our business, right? And if we're waiting in line to get coffee someplace, no, I'm probably not going to be like, let's do a Socratic seminar on systemic racism, guys. Like, that's not going to be that approach. However, could I get there by asking a few questions? Say that I see a police officer at Dunkin' Donuts, okay? Dunkin' Donuts doesn't sponsor us, so they're not paying me. I made this coffee. But say that I am at a Dunkin' Donuts and there's a police officer. Well, if I engage him and find out he's been on the force for a while, maybe he serves in the town that I live in, whatever, we could easily very quickly engage in a conversation about, yeah, so how do you feel about everything going on, right? Specifically regarding racism. You could get there. But again, that goes back to personality. Like, if I think about even like our brother, he's not super outgoing and talkative the first times you encounter him. And he probably wouldn't be the type of person that, if he didn't know me, like if I were just approaching him in a coffee shop, he'd probably think I was like trying to hit on him, or like I don't know, he'd just be kind of quiet about it. I think you're frozen. Hello?
Must have had an internet glitch.
Sorry, listeners. We had a little glitch, so I paused the recording, but we're back. So I was trying to paint a picture, because our brother's pretty quiet, kind of keeps to himself, not like this super, oh, I'm going to dance in the doorway or anything like that. But I was just saying, if I were to encounter him and we don't know each other, we're not related, and I just tried to strike up a conversation while we're waiting in line for coffee, like he would be a little standoffish, but that's more his personality style. He's just a little more reserved. He's not super outgoing, right, when he meets somebody. And he would either think, okay, I don't feel like, I think he would probably think I don't feel like talking with you, or he would think that I was trying to hit on him. Like, so I think, no, I'm saying if I'm trying to paint a picture of personality style with like somebody who I know won't be offended that I use him as an example. But that's the reality. Imagine his personality, right? And my personality, he probably wouldn't want to engage in like some in-depth conversation.
Well, I think for me, I like when I verbally say something, or I'm in a heated conversation or whatever. It can be either heated or not heated, but sometimes after the conversation is over, I'm like, ooh, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have said this differently, or
Why?
maybe I was too, I don't know, because I am better with written word.
Okay.
Because I can, first of all, think about it as I'm writing it. Second of all, I can go back and reread it as many times as I need to say, like, okay, if I'm the other person reading this, is this going to feel confrontational, or is this going to feel safe and okay to engage with? And I always want to make sure that it's safe and okay to engage with. At least, like, that's my thinking. Now, it may not always be on their end of it.
Right.
However, my intention when I write something online is always to make people feel safe, to engage, and also to invite conversation about whatever it is that what we're talking about. So for me, it gives me, I guess I'm a reflector in that way, because it gives me a chance to process things. I always like to process things in a written way and then reread it. And sometimes, like, and I know probably a lot of people do this, but if I'm upset about something, I'll write a letter or an email and then I'll erase it.
You erase it?
Yeah, sometimes.
I've done it before, and then I like screenshot it or save it because I want to remember my progress. That's why, like, I like to look back at old journals because you can see your thought process and how it's evolved over time. That might sound really nerdy, but I'm literally looking across the room at my bookshelf, which, by the way, pardon my giant Post-it notes behind me. I'm trying to get my...
Speaking of Post-its, my son's trying to get my attention with a Post-it. Oh. Hold on. What can I have for lunch?
Hey.
Nothing. We'll be done soon. I will get your lunch.
Who is that?
Skedaddle.
Is that baby Chins?
Yeah. Isaiah, who's hooked on cereal. He wants to eat cereal 3 meals a day, every day.
He's a boy after my own heart. Well, yeah, no, I literally have journals from 10 years ago, which I also find fascinating because I hope that those are something that is treasured. Like, I remember when our great grandma passed, when we were going through everything, finding her excerpts, and it was so fascinating to me to read. Like, I still remember reading some, and it was like, it would have been when we were small, but she would be talking about our parents, and like, Renee brought the kids for overnight, and then Pablo brought them to go sledding or whatever. Like, but it's so sweet because, we grew up, I was just telling my man Thaddeus the other day how we used to think the hill in their backyard was so massive. And now when we drive by, we're like, why did we roll down that for hours and think that was so huge? But, perspective, right? When you're a kid, and I think that's the other thing. We are very, we have to remember some of the things that maybe we're trying to be overly sensitive about discussing. Our kids just kind of say it like it is, and they don't see the world the same way that we do. And to an extent, they don't live in necessarily the same exact world that we grew up in. So I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing, but your middle son, what he said, I just
Yeah.
thought it was so sweet, but it was such a picture of, for him, why is that even a conversation?
Right. Right.
And
So
you would just provide context that you were having a conversation with somebody on the phone.
yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody on the phone, and one of my children happened to be nearby, and it wasn't like, it was a conversation that needed to be had. Execution wise, I could have done a lot better.
Why you normally write down your thoughts?
Exactly. So in short, I ended up yelling, raising my voice, and hanging up on this person. And it's a person that I love, you know, it's not somebody that is just, and I mean, it doesn't matter if
It
I
wasn't
love them or
me.
not,
It
but
wasn't me, listeners.
no, it wasn't her.
Although we've hung up on each other before, I'm certain.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
like stormed out of your house.
Yeah, that's happened. Anyway, so things got heated, and one of my kids happened to be riding his bike next to me while I was taking a walk, and then this conversation started out of the blue. Anyways, I was explaining, because I was incredibly upset about it, and I was the kids were like, well, why are you upset? Why are you crying? What's wrong? And I basically was just like, I was having this conversation, and I felt like I was being told what I should and shouldn't say. I was being censored, and I was being told that I should not be speaking out in the way that I have been on social media. And I feel I've been deeply in tune with God during this whole, you know, quarantine time as to what am I supposed to share with the world? What am I supposed to be putting out there? Because there's a lot of negative energy out there. There's a lot of controversy out there. What is my role in this? And I don't feel like there's anything that I've said or put out there that I have regret for, because all of the things that I've toiled and labored and prayed over before putting them out. It's not in my conscience. It's not a matter of, ooh, did I do the right thing or wrong thing? I'm fully confident, but this person was trying to tell me that I was not justified in having an opinion on this, because how could I really understand it? So I was explaining this, and my middle child pops in and he goes, well, I don't understand. Why are people even arguing about, like, Black lives do matter? Why are people, like, he couldn't wrap his head around, how is this a conversation?
He just turned 11, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he, you know, we've always been very open with our kids, and I've had conversations with them about throughout this whole time, more so now than I have in the past, because, and this was a blind spot of mine, I didn't, like, to me in my life and the way that I live, none of this has been uh put in my face in the way that it has been in the last couple of months.
As far as systemic.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's where a lot of people, like, I grew up having friends of all kinds of backgrounds and cultures, and it was never like, I've always incorporated that into my life. And so it was shocking when all of this started, these conversations around Black Lives Matter happened a couple months ago, and I'm like, wait, like, there are people out there still that this, like, they want to fight against a movement that is going to be better for millions of people. Like, it just blew my mind. And so yeah, he nailed it in that very simple childlike statement. Wait, but everybody, like, Black lives do matter. I don't understand.
He just,
are people actually arguing about this, Mom?
Right. And so it becomes that perspective, which is going to be different for every family, and also what was talked about and how you were raised. The type of literature that you're exposed to, I think, is huge. And we always, I don't know if we've mentioned this before, we definitely talk about it between each other. Like, that's a huge blessing. Like, our mother is a history buff, and she loves to read. And, you know, that was one of the main activities we did every summer. And actually that's when truly I was thinking and writing about this the other day. My love affair with cities, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, began because our mom would take us to the different branches of the public library in the summers. We would always have different books we were checking out. And my favorite branch was the downtown Elkhart Public Library because it was like 2 or 3 stories tall. And it just seemed, again, perception and perspective as a kid. And I was just in our hometown a couple weeks ago because one of my friends was moving. And so she was having like going away sale, and she lives in downtown Elkhart. And it was so surreal because now it feels so tiny. And it's not a super tiny city. It's in listeners, it's in Indiana, if you're not from Indiana. But it's not super, super tiny. It's not super, super big, but I mean, it's a decent sized city that there's at least like a downtown and, you know, decent amount of traffic. But anyway, so it was just interesting being there and like reminiscing about how anytime we would drive there, it was like this huge thing. And I'd be in awe, like, I love the city. I want to live in the city. But I'm saying all that to say, we were exposed to so many types of literature, but especially a lot of historical, like nonfiction and also historical fiction. Like we grew up on a lot of different types of books, but those were my very favorite. My book that I read cover to cover multiple times was The Girl on the Outside. And it's a Coretta Scott King Award winner. I look back and I'm like, man, it informs how you see the world and what you're exposed to. But I share all that to say, like, you can't make the assumption that regardless of how somebody grew up, that they just have a knowledge of things that maybe you have a knowledge of, or a lived experience of the things that you've lived. We can't assume that. I think with us, right, it is that world of, you know, our father's Puerto Rican heritage, our mother's Amish Mennonite backgrounds, but then your husband is Korean and white. Like, there's these layers in our family. We have people who are different races in our family. And then we joke about this. We've actually joked about it since we were kids. So we're fine with putting ourselves out there. Even if you look at like me and you, our skin tones, like there's always variations in how people look. And that was all, no, but it was magnified because in the summers, I don't know if you remember this, but yeah, in the summers, Mom would call me her brown bunny.
Yeah, I do remember. I was jealous.
But why though? Why? Right? That's the question. Why?
Yeah. Why were like? Because I can't get a tan. And I like a tan.
It just shows you how something, I mean, and that was the whole start of everything, right? When people colonized the United States, they weaponized something as medial as skin color, which even if you look within African heritage, Latino heritage, every different race and ethnicity, it goes beyond that, because then there's issues of colorism. There's issues of, oh, what shade are you? Are you dark skin? Are you light skin? I mean, it goes on and on, and that's why it is a bigger battle. The specific battle right now, and naming it in the U.S., is that the U.S. was founded with the specific dehumanization of Black people. So, anyways, I find it fascinating though, because sometimes we have to put ourselves back into, okay, why do I really think this way, and when did I start thinking that way? Because it's from the mouth of kids, you know?
Yeah. It's really interesting too how to somebody else our way of thinking about diversity and inclusion is harmful to their belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's quote unquote crazy liberalism.
Can you give an example of, like, when you say that broadly for like diversity and inclusion, what's an example that's coming to mind?
I mean, the fact that we acknowledge that Black Lives Matter is a liberal ideology to some people. It's controversial to some people. On the other perspective, I find it controversial if you don't recognize that Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and back to our conversation, at what point, like, I don't feel comfortable saying agree to disagree on that, because it's like, it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, do you like vanilla or chocolate ice cream? Okay, like, well, actually, I like strawberry. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, it actually matters to somebody else how you think about this issue. So at what point, and what kind of things are we standing firm on? And I have to go back to scripture and the call to love being the most powerful thing and message that Jesus taught.
Right.
And to me, that's where I get my the core and the support for what I do believe about loving other people and the acceptance and inclusion of other people. They're almost, yeah, I don't know where the conversation really does stop, because I feel like I have a moral obligation to continue to speak up on this and say, no, this is not an issue of right and left or liberal and conservative or believer, non-believer. Like, it's not any of those things. There's not a lot of issues like
It's
that.
a matter of valuing human life, and that every human life deserves to be equal. Right. And so when you look at that, let me give an example that came to mind. Agree or disagree. Okay. Let's go here. Would you allow your children to be babysat by somebody who the construct they operated off of was based that, and they had biblical scripture to back it up, that children are to be seen and not heard? And so when you go to this babysitter's house, you find out that her way or his way for implementing that particular belief is that all day long they put duct tape over your kids' mouths. Would you allow your kids to be babysat by that person?
No.
Okay, so she disagrees with that approach, that belief system.
Right.
Even though she found some scripture to support that babysitter found scripture to support that children should respect their parents. And children,
let's not even say duct tape. Let's say I lock them in a room or tell them they have to stay in a room.
Well, I feel a bit triggered. I feel a bit triggered, and Kara knows why.
Same.
Yes. I didn't use that example specifically, Kara, because Kara and I actually experienced that when we were growing up. Which
at a babysitter's.
We told, which was good.
Yeah.
Another story for another day. We didn't have to go back.
Yeah.
But when you know better, you do better, right? Okay. So my point with all this is saying, if God grants me the blessing to birth a child or children in the next few years, and my children are Black, mixed race, and I know that a friend or a babysitter has shared openly and adamantly with scriptural support, weaponized, to say, well, all lives matter, and no life is greater than another, and I'm not a racist. Racism doesn't really exist. I don't see color, and so I'm not going to get on board with all this radical things going on. Do you think I'd let my kids go to that babysitter? How is that any different? You've justified the dehumanization of an entire race of people. You've justified it, and you may have found scriptures that indeed they might talk about everybody mattering, or to keep peace.
We got to talk about that too.
But I don't know if this picture I'm painting is making sense, or if you can bring it full circle. for me, but like, do you understand what I'm putting out there?
Love is radical. Think about loving another person. We're all very imperfect. We're all very hard to love for certain reasons. Because and the reason
Yeah,
that I'm hard to love for Justine might be different than why I'm hard to love like by my husband.
that's
He
right.
might look at
That's a
me,
good point.
you know what I mean? Like there are things that you love about me that my husband finds hard to love about me. Like my sass
Yeah,
and my
our significant others probably should spend more time together.
but because love is radical, because we have to like we have to set aside the things that we can see in somebody that bug us and like hone in and love the things that matter about somebody and matter to God about somebody. That's radical.
Isn't that marriage though?
Yeah.
Every day you make the decision.
Yeah. Yes.
And the same for ourselves in the mirror. That person also decides to show up, and amidst all of my mess, still chooses to see the good in me.
Yep. Not only chooses to see it,
So,
love that.
but let's take that further, because here's where we might have somebody who disagrees, okay? And they might say, okay, well, you're saying you need to see somebody past that ugliness. So Justine, why can't you see past when somebody has their perspective and their opinion on the Confederate flag? So why can't you love them? Because there's good things. I'm sure there are good things about every human being in the world. That I'm confident of, because we're all created in the image of God. But what I am also confident of is I will be damned if I'm going to subject my loved ones, myself, or anyone to a friend, family member, stranger on the street, anybody who tries to make an argument for why an entire human race doesn't matter. So no, that's where I draw the line, and where there's a very, very big difference between we disagree on our favorite ice cream flavors versus we disagree on overt hatred and racism. To
What
me,
if
it is
somebody
no different than saying, well, I think that jihadists are actually like, they mean well. Jihadists mean well. They really believe
in their
it.
mind, yes, they do.
And in their mind they do. They fully believe it. But does it make the fact that they kill thousands of people through acts of terror okay? No, it doesn't. And I won't condone it, nor will I expose people that I deeply love to that. Just the same that you would never send kids to a babysitter who locks them up or puts duct tape over their mouth.
What do we say to people that maybe they don't come out and say, I support the display of the Confederacy. I want to openly keep that as part of our history. Say it's a little more nuanced than that, and they say, actually, anybody should be able to pick themselves up by their bootstraps like I have and do the things that I've done to get where I've gone or where I am.
I would say they're still operating off of a place of ego, and that ego and self-servient thought processes are what birth racism.
What about the person that says, I think we should treat everybody the same. I believe that all lives matter, but that this movement of Black Lives Matter is actually racist in and of itself. I think we've come a long way. My family didn't own slaves. Why is this getting put back on me? I don't see systemic racism anywhere, but that's my belief. Kara. I believe that. So can you not, you're not respecting my belief? What,
Well, in that situation, so there's a lot of things that you could unpack about it, but I would ask, how am I not respecting it when I'm engaging in dialogue with you? Can you let me know what I'm doing to disrespect your opinion right now? Because if you want to continue having a conversation with somebody, even if you know that you disagree, the only way actually to move us forward in progress is that at a certain point, like we have to show love to people who perhaps, it's like the Bible verse says, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. And we've all been there in different realms and different situations of our lives. So I don't think it's a matter of I'm condemning the thought process. I'm not condemning the fact that might be that only narrative or the only thing that person knows. Right. Am I always going to be the one to be there and address it? No. But I think that there's a way to say things and still do it in love and give people a chance, right? I have one friend in particular right now, haven't heard a peep for over a month. But this is also a friend who in the past has made very clear comments to me about not wanting her own kids to date Black people. And so because I know that, she's probably operating in a way of like, I don't want to approach this teen right now. Now, I won't have a problem having a conversation, but at the same time, you have to understand, and I'm sharing this very vulnerably for listeners to hear a real life example. You have to understand long term why I would make the decision to choose my thought process in that situation over somebody I've been friends with for years. And here's why. If you've told me clearly that you would never want one of my future sons or daughters to date one of yours because you told me they're not good enough, that's the evil that stems from it, and not because she's an evil person. She has succumbed to, and it's a person of color, by the way, not a Black person, but a person of color. So when you look at how deeply that's embedded, whether it's through our education institutions, how history is taught, to say that Black life matters is not saying that all these other lives don't matter. But can you imagine if you and I participated in a breast cancer walk, and we showed up and we had on T-shirts about, I'm
prostate cancer.
No, that all breasts matter, and we're not victims, we're not survivors. We haven't had to be afflicted with breast cancer, thank God. Okay. But you and I show up to this walk, and we have signs made that say all breasts matter, including ours, which are healthy.
That's weird.
Do we have a privilege over the person we're walking next to?
Absolutely.
Who has poorer health because of chemo? Do we have a privilege from an image perspective because we still have breasts and maybe they don't?
Yeah.
Due to something that they couldn't control?
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing, and most people would look at that, and it's very clear to see why. Oh, well, Kara, Justine, that is hateful. Why would you ever do? We would be in the news.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come, and you can never argue. So when I give that example, it's because then you could never get down this trail of diversion. And we want to talk about spiritual warfare. That's what the enemy does, is use diversion to get away from the evil that's been birthed. And so a lot of times when people are bringing up these other arguments, they don't realize it even. They don't even realize that that's a tactic. That's a tactic to distract when it becomes about politics, when it even becomes about religion, which religion is different than having a relationship with God and also using God-given scripture to support something. But I won't even go into all that because we're pretty in depth with our time now. But all that to say, we would never then be like, oh, well, the who is it, Susan B. Komen, or like all the cancer centers and stuff. I think that's the name. I don't know, but somebody who's a breast cancer survivor we would never then get on a soapbox and say, oh, well, she's just part of Planned Parenthood, or she's just part of a leftist agenda. Like, we would never go down those tangents, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about breast cancer survivors.
Yeah. What do you say? What do you say to people? And I know you said we won't get too much into the religion stuff, but I've heard a lot of people from the evangelical church in America talking about how this division that's happening right now, it's being brought to light because of evil in the world, which it's always been there. We're just seeing it
for over 400 years.
We're seeing it clearly now. But what do you say to the people who are like, our job as believers in God or believers in Christ is to keep the peace and to not cause further division? We're not to stand up and use our voice. We're supposed to stay silent right now. We're supposed to be in the pursuit of peace and coming from a place of love and the way God loves and the way Jesus loved when he spent his time here on earth. I don't see what Jesus did on earth as peaceful at all. He was up against any kind of a religious authority or politician back in the day to say, no, sir, that's not how my God operates. And that's what he came to say. And so, just by the virtue of the fact that we have such a large influx of people from the evangelical church perpetuating this message. Now, there are some outliers to that. And I think there are places that are coming maybe around a little bit more, but better than anybody the history of Jesus on earth. How can you say that his life and his embodiment of who God was peaceful?
It goes back to perception, Kara. Because if you read the scriptures in a way that is how you picture Jesus, just like some picture him as white, some picture him as black, some picture him as brown. It's your perception. So doesn't necessarily mean that person's wrong in their thinking about what Jesus wanted, but my short question is always, did Jesus ever ask to be followed? So when you read the scriptures, you read the stories, you read the red letters, which are Jesus speaking in the Bible in particular, did he ever ask to be followed? I mean, did he have to?
No.
And he also made it very clear, this is the other thing I think that sometimes people who identify as Christian, because they are Christ followers, that's to me the definition of Christian, is that you're a Christ follower, follower of Christ's teachings. He also spoke very adamantly to his disciples that if you go to a town and they don't receive your message, dust off your sandals and keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
So he also was very clear that if you are sharing a message of loving thy neighbor, the core teaching of Jesus, guess what? If your message isn't received because you want to love your black neighbor, dust off those sandals and keep it moving. Maybe we should end there. I don't know. I don't know how long we've been talking.
It's okay. I've seen some people going on for about 2 or 3 hours these days on their podcast, so it's all right.
It's a great outlet. But I have a call in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And I know your kids are waiting to do an activity with you too.
Yeah.
I'm being an advocate for your kids. Any final broad thoughts? I want to read a meme that I saw this morning that I really liked. I shared it, that had to do with COVID-19.
Ooh, I have a meme that I'd like to end on too. So, okay.
I wanted your nurse, your healthcare professional not just nurse, because Kara's done more than just be a nurse in multitudes of arenas within the hospital networks. She's also been a professional educator in the nursing field, which is her current capacity. So I want your thoughts as a healthcare professional, because now, right, we're going to start to see these reports of, did protests, because this is another argument point, did protests contribute to the surge? Did we really flatten the curve? All the different competing things. I am just asking for listeners, what's your current perspective, your lived experience from Kara Gonzalez Howard? Again, listeners, she has 15 plus years of healthcare expertise and it has been in the profession, and also has a very her own individual lived experience. I'm not saying that you have to agree with her. I'm personally asking your opinion because I value your opinion when it comes to healthcare matters. So, disclaimer, but what is your perspective on how people should be behaving, right? It's clearly not a normal quote unquote summer. We're only about a week into summer anyways, officially. But there are definitely areas of the country where we see people out. They are out. They are wide open and they are not wearing masks. And then we still have parts of the country that are still very, very closed and very some heavy guidance still around stay-at-home orders, posted signage where you cannot enter any place without a mask. Just what's your just kind of concise thoughts on what approach?
I'll tell you an analogy. So I was helping a patient up to the bathroom the other day, and as part of our safety process, we always put what's called a gait belt on our patients when we help them up. If there's any remote possibility, we say, if we're, hold on, my kids are screaming.
That's okay.
I'm going to mute and yell.
I'll pause. All right, we're back, listeners. We paused momentarily because Kara had to get her kids.
Anyways, so I was helping this patient up. We put a gait belt around their chest so that if there's a chance that if we're assisting them in any way, we do this, because not because they aren't able to do it on their own, but if they start to fall, it's an easy way for us as a nurse to lower them safely to the ground so they don't hit their head, break a hip, whatever.
Right.
So a lot of patients don't like that they have to do this. They feel like, they're in the hospital, but at home they get up and around just fine. Why do I need this? I'm not going to fall. Well, I don't think you're going to fall, but I also have your safety in mind, and it's important. This is the recommendation that has been proven best practice, and so this is what I'm going to do, even though I don't believe that you're going to fall. We're going to utilize this device. Same thing for mask wearing, social distancing. It's a recommendation. It's the best practice of what we know. And I know that those guidelines have changed, but we also never seen anything like this before. And I think it's important that instead of trying to conjure up the same people that were incredibly afraid of this thing when it came out are now the ones going out and saying, I get to do whatever I want. I live in America. I have the right to not wear a mask if I don't want to. You certainly have all of those rights, but is it wise to go against best practice recommendations that, yes, are evolving and changing? I would rather err on the side of, I'm not an expert. I am not going to buy into any conspiracy theories related to this at all, because right now what we're talking about is a simple mask, hand washing, and social distancing, all three of which are valuable even when we're not in a global pandemic, as far as like reducing the spread of germs.
Right.
We use practices all the time in the hospital setting. I'm not going to get up in somebody's face when I'm taking care of them.
But also in other countries, if you've traveled in other countries, it's very common to wear masks. That's a normal practice.
So what my recommendation is, or what my perspective is that it's really harmful to introduce politics into this. It's really harmful to make it about you because obviously this isn't a fun thing for anybody. Everybody's being affected, from the wealthiest to the poorest.
Yep.
And I just think it's really an inconsiderate thing that you're putting yourself out to be a person that has no regard for other people. And that's how I see it, because I'm a caregiver. I want to help people and help them heal. And it's like, well, why would you even take a position to argue, even if you believe that it's a conspiracy theory? Why would you take a position to outwardly say, like, I don't care about you enough to...
I like your word choice, inconsiderate, because that's, I mean, and I'm going to read this meme, and then I know you have one to share. So this meme I read, it's pretty straightforward, and I want to share it because I thought it was so good, and it highlights exactly what you're saying, just being inconsiderate. It says, I wear my mask while in public for 3 reasons. Number 1, humility. I don't know if I have COVID, as it is clear that people can spread the disease before they have symptoms. Number 2, kindness. I don't know if the person I am near has a kid battling cancer or cares for their elderly mom. While I might be fine, they might not. And number 3, community. I want my community to thrive, businesses to stay open, employees to stay healthy. Keeping a lid on COVID helps us all. So that's the other thing, because there's consistently been a push to reopen the economy, which completely understood, right? Like, I think everybody understands, yes, we don't want massive recession. We don't want to continue to not have the economy flowing. But at the same token, if that's what you want, why is it so difficult to just put on a mask?
Well, and at that, we, in Indiana anyway, we have an economy that has been opening back up for the last month.
Right.
But because people were inconsiderate, there have been several local businesses that have had to close down because people coming into their businesses have not been considerate enough to wear a mask. And so those people that own the businesses have gotten sick and had to shut down. And it's not because a governor or somebody is telling you you can't open. It's because of the inconsideration of the patrons of those businesses that said they wanted the economy to open back up. It's all very convoluted to me.
Yep.
And like, let's simplify this, and just, not that we should all be sheep and just do what we're told or fall in line.
No, what would Jesus do? He would be considerate.
He'd be considerate.
And he would love his neighbor.
He would love his neighbor. He would realize that some things are based in science. Some things are based in fact. And that's all I'm going to say. Okay, I'm going to read you
faith. We don't have to fully define faith, but if you're also thinking, when Kara just said that, well, science and facts aren't the same as faith. Faith without action is dead. So that action could be actions that are backed by science and facts. Okay, I've said my piece.
Okay, so the one I am going to read is by somebody named Tanya Markul.
Okay.
And she said, I used to try to be good. I thought no one wanted me as I was, so good was my go-to. But good got me nowhere. Not like truth. Truth, she tore me to shreds, devoured me whole, and spit me out, shaking anew. Truth keeps a box of matches in my pocket, while good made me afraid of transformative fire. Truth keeps me real, even if it makes everyone in the room uncomfortable. And truth, unlike good, doesn't let me bow down to bullshit or undeserving soapboxes. Truth doesn't let me give in to bullies, misguided and fear-based criticism, or cowards. Truth is a queen and a humanitarian, while good, she's a silent, scared little sheep. Truth knows that good dulls my already radiant, fierce, and loving soul. Good showed me how to hide my wings, my words, and angel vision. Truth taught me to be brave. Truth taught me how to respect myself. Truth allows me to hold impenetrable space for any story, but first and foremost for my own. And truth, well, she changes everything. And friend, she's coming for you too.
Brava! Okay, well, great charge to end for our listeners and viewers. Thank you for tuning in. This has been episode 41 of the Sunflower Society podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform if you listen via podcast, or if you watch via YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our new Spiritually Strategic Co. YouTube channel. We'd love to have you as a subscriber, and we look forward to getting your thoughts and feedback on this episode. But it's been great, sister. I love you, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye, sister.